The woman just went to the sea to take a bath. Unexpectedly, when she came ashore, she found that her husband had secretly taken off his pants, tied them into a knot with his belt, tied his feet and climbed up the tall coconut tree. This made the woman both curious and confused, so she immediately got dressed and rushed into the coconut grove. When Coco walked quietly to her feet, she found that her husband was in love with another woman. She was so angry that she took a breath of cold air, but she still suppressed her anger and listened for 2 hours before speaking calmly. The guilty man's brain was working in overdrive, and he quickly explained to his angry wife that he was here to pick coconuts. After hearing this, the Coco woman nodded in acquiescence, as if she was brewing a terrible conspiracy. In a blink of an eye, the afterglow of the sunset gradually dissipated. She touched her husband's forehead thoughtfully, but her eyes were fixed on the luxury yacht on the shore. Etc. Early the next morning, the man was awakened by the sea water, and she approached her husband with malicious intentions. After listening to his wife's words, the man obviously didn't believe it, but he still chose to use the trick and decided to wait for his wife to find the water source, then quietly follow behind to find out. Sure enough, the yacht was found in a canyon cave. It turns out that the wife wanted to hide the boat and mobile phone and trap her betrayed husband on a desert island so that he could never escape. However, after the man saw it, he did not reveal it on the spot. Instead, he pretended to be casual and tasted red wine with his wife on the beach. However, there was a murderous look in his eyes. He stared at the key around his wife's neck and waited for the morning sun to shine again. Face, the man quickly got up to find food, and the wife who noticed the abnormality hurriedly touched her chest and found that she was wearing it. Yee disappeared out of thin air. She stood up and wanted to chase him, but was tightly entangled by the rope under her feet. Looking at her husband's ugly face, she realized that her conspiracy had been exposed. Immediately afterwards, the man strode to the yacht, decided to abandon his sinister and vicious wife, and return to the city alone to enjoy the rest of his life. What's very puzzling about Coco is that the woman has clearly broken free, but has no intention of stepping forward to stop her. However, the man doesn't think about it at all. He waved to his wife perfunctorily and stepped on the accelerator toward the horizon. Drive away. However, he was completely unaware that underneath the fast-moving yacht, there was a huge hemp rope tightly wrapped around the rock, which was about to set off a huge wave. The man who encountered the plot was completely dumbfounded and suddenly realized that he had been trapped by his wife, but this was just the beginning. Just when he was swimming back to the shore with all his strength, his wife had already made a powerful crossbow out of rattan and dead branches, and decided to let her betrayed husband completely walk into the abyss. The woman was squatting in the jungle making a crossbow, but she didn't notice at all that her husband was quietly approaching her with a wooden stick. He was walking like a cat, fearing that he would step on fallen leaves and make a sound that would disturb his wife's ears. He didn't slow down until he was close to the attack distance. He raised his arms, but suddenly there was a chirping of birds in the jungle, which instantly attracted his wife's attention, and he looked around alertly. She looked around, but she didn't notice that her husband behind her was raising a wooden stick and aiming it at her Tialingai. Looking at his wife's fallen figure, the husband did not feel the slightest joy. He threw away the stick and froze on the spot, falling into brief contemplation. Seeing that his wife was still motionless, he nervously stepped forward to check, but accidentally stepped on the trap arranged by the woman and was instantly hung in the air, unable to escape. After hours of struggle, the wife finally woke up from the coma. She looked up and saw that her husband was hanging on the tree. She recalled everything in an instant. She couldn't believe her eyes, and she was even more disappointed with this paragraph. After 10 years of marriage, she was completely disappointed, so she angrily picked up the stick. I plan to teach this heartless white-eyed wolf a lesson. However, just as he was about to take action, there was a faint roar behind him. But this is obviously an isolated island where birds don't poop, and it is impossible for there to be so many wild beasts. The woman suddenly woke up and realized what was approaching. Then she immediately dropped the stick and ran away. At this moment, the man was still looking surprised. It was not until a group of cannibals attacked like a mad dog that he was so frightened that his body swung wildly involuntarily. He climbed up a tree branch to hide when the cannibals came closer, and finally escaped. Past the tribulation, and it wasn't until the clansman's figure completely disappeared that the man dared to break free and drag his stiff body to run for his life. But he thought he was out of danger, but unexpectedly, my heart suddenly hit rock bottom. Unexpectedly, his wife was armed with a bow and arrow and ambushed him on his way ahead of time. But just as he was about to open his mouth to quibble, his wife suddenly shot a cold arrow. The sound of the arrow piercing the air kept echoing in his ears. The huge force made the man stunned on the spot. It was hard to believe that his wife, who had been together day and night, could be so heartless. But just as he was about to turn around and ask his wife, he raised his hand and shot another arrow. Fortunately, the arrow just missed his face, otherwise the blood would stain his face red. At this moment, the man finally realized that his wife was really going to kill him. He had no choice but to hide behind the tree and peek sideways. When he saw his wife pointing the crossbow firmly at him, he hurriedly leaned over and picked up a piece of coconut fruit. Throw it forward with all your strength. While the coconut was shattered by the blow, he immediately rushed out from behind the tree and ran towards the mountains as hard as he could. However, with the brute force of his feet alone, how could he be faster than the crossbow that shot through the air? Fortunately, when the rain arrow approached the door, he grabbed the tree trunk to block it. However, the man who was surrounded by danger did not even think about it and plunged into the cannibal's cave, only to be hit head-on by his wife. Got it right. Before he could react, the woman picked up a huge honey pot and smashed him to the ground, knocking him unconscious and unable to move. However, what awaits the man next is undoubtedly more cruel torture. The man just climbed up a tree and called his secretary in the city, and was frantically pursued by his first wife, the secretary. However, when she saw her husband unconscious, his wife, who had just been full of hatred, suddenly panicked. She quickly turned her husband over and pressed his chest repeatedly with both hands, trying to wake up this ungrateful guy. It wasn't until this moment that the woman deeply realized that even though she wanted to beat her husband to death just now, when she was facing farewell, her love for him was still strong in her heart. Looking at her husband's sleeping face, his wife lay in his arms in despair, tears falling uncontrollably. Or perhaps sensing his wife's grief, the man suddenly sat up from the ground, breathing heavily. Then the couple looked at each other and didn't say a word for a long time, but they seemed to understand each other's feelings. The originally hostile gaze also softened at this moment. But the real ordeal has just begun. For them, escaping this dangerous island is simply impossible. Without the help of the map and the extreme lack of food, no matter how good the relationship between the couple was, they would not be able to sustain it for long. Sure enough, when the two were looking for a chance of survival, they unfortunately strayed into the territory of the cannibals and were stabbed by an anesthetic-coated blowgun. When they regained consciousness again, they were already firmly tied to the sacrificial costume by the tribal chief. Chief Coco did not intend to eat their flesh and blood, but ordered his blonde wife to be smeared with powder all over her body in preparation for being burned alive to the god of fire, while the man was knocked unconscious on the spot. Sai was stuffed into a canoe and pushed into the vast sea. As a tribute to the god of the sea, the wife was soon surrounded by a ball of fire asterisk, and the man floated to the waterfall in the distance along with the rapid river. At this critical moment of life and death, the man suddenly woke up from his coma and found that he was about to fall into the abyss. Without thinking, he jumped suddenly and grabbed onto the raised rock wall. He managed to escape with his life, but the danger was not eliminated. In order to rescue his wife who was about to be burned to death, the man quietly sneaked into the cannibal tribe. Before anyone noticed, he rushed forward and knocked down the chief with his fists. Then he kicked the fire under his wife, concentrating all the strength of his body on holding his wife tightly with both hands. The wooden stakes were uprooted, and their bravery shocked everyone present. While the tribesmen were still stunned, he carried the wooden stake and ran towards the cliff without any hesitation before jumping down. In the precipitous sky, the couple were like two ants that had lost their footing, small and fragile. But at this time, they had already forgotten about life and death. During the rapid fall, they completed a long-lost eye contact. Under the surprised gaze of the accompanying natives, they fell straight into the deep sea. But soon the two of them surfaced out of the sea with the help of wooden piles, which completely angered the cannibals on the top of the cliff and fired their spears one after another. Fortunately, the man had quick eyesight and quick hands. He quickly turned the wooden stake and easily blocked the fatal attack. Then he used the sharp tip of the gun to cut the hemp rope, took his wife's hand, and rushed towards the jungle. But the two of them did not dare to neglect it all. They hurriedly picked up the stolen canoe and rushed to the opposite shore of the island. After pushing the canoe into the sea, they slid away as hard as they could. Only then were they safe, escaped from death. With this experience of life and death, the estrangement between the two completely disappeared, replaced by a silent tacit understanding, and they soon left the island of hidden dangers and sailed towards a new life full of hope. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and click the notification bell.